This will be the November CSR. Plaintiff Attorney, Ms. Oliver, Oliver. Defense Attorney, Mr. Carter, Carter. Calling People versus Randall. Appearances, please. Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you. Susan Oliver for the People. Good morning, Your Honor. Jim Carter on behalf of Mr. Randall, who is here in custody. All right. We're proceeding on the first complaint. Is that right? Well, that's the only one I have in front of me. Now, this case is here for prelim. The complaint charges the defendant with the felony violation of Penal Code Section 245, said to have occurred on July 4th, 2012. We are ready to proceed. Okay. For the record, my client is now standing in the holding cell of the courtroom. If you and your client choose, I will allow Mr. Randall to sit at the counsel table. I think he is fine, Your Honor. Is that acceptable with you? Yes, Your Honor. Okay, are the people ready? Yes, Your Honor. Any preliminary motions? Not on behalf of the defendant, Your Honor. None by the people. All right, people can call their first witness. Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the people call Deputy Taft. For the record, please state your full name and spell your last name. Stephen David Taft, last name Taft, T-A-F-T. Thank you. Whenever you are ready. Thank you, Your Honor. Proceed. Good morning, Deputy Taft. Good morning. Could you please tell us your current occupation and assignment? I am a deputy for the Orange County Sheriff's Department assigned to the main jail in Module B. How long have you been a peace officer? About 2 years, ma'am. Can you describe some of your duties as a deputy within the jail? To control the movements of the inmates and housing of inmates. Just make sure the safety of all inmates is cared for. All right, I apologize. Would you mind scooting that microphone a little bit closer to you? Sorry. Were you on duty in the jail on July 4th, 2012 at approximately 4:30? Yes, ma'am. On that date and time, were you dispensing medication to inmates in Module B? Yes, ma'am. On that date and time in that area, did you have an opportunity to speak to an individual named Robert Mitchell? Yes, ma'am. And while you were speaking with Robert Mitchell, what happened? He came out and told me that he needed to roll it up. I am sorry. I didn't understand you. The victim told me he needed to roll it up. Are you familiar with what that phrase means? Definitely. And what does that mean? It is a common phrase for a prisoner to use if they feel concerned for their personal safety. After Mr. Mitchell told you he wanted to roll it up, did you inquire of him what exactly he meant by reporting that? Yes. What did he tell you? He stated that he had just been victim of a crime. He had been assaulted by inmates in his housing unit. Did you go into detail with Mr. Mitchell about what exactly had just happened to him? Yes, I did. But that was after I escorted him away from other inmates to speak with him privately. Where did you take him? Just outside into the hallway on the 3rd floor. There is a lobby. Did you subsequently interview him? Yes, ma'am. What did Mr. Mitchell tell you at that time? He reported to me he was sitting on his bunk reading a book when an inmate by the name of Baker approached him and kicked him in the face. The name he reported was Baker? Yes. Did Mr. Mitchell express to you what happened after Mr. Baker had kicked him in the face? He fell to the ground. He looked up and recognized him as Baker. After he did that, he continued to be hit. He tried to cover his face with his hands and his forearms. After covering himself, what happened after that? He said that another inmate by the name of Jackson then also began hitting him using his feet, knees, and fists. Did Mr. Mitchell tell you how many times he was hit by Jackson and Baker? I cannot recall. Would reviewing your report refresh your recollection? Yes, ma'am. With your Honor's permission, please. All right. Deputy, if you can look at your report, read it to yourself silently, and then let us know when you are finished. Okay. Deputy, I can direct your attention to the middle of page 2. Thank you. I am ready, Your Honor. If you can re-ask your question. Did Mr. Mitchell tell you where he was being hit by Baker and Jackson? Yes, he did. What did he tell you? He reported he was being hit to the back of his head and at the rear torso. Did Mr. Mitchell advise you that he heard Baker and Jackson say anything while they were hitting him? They repeatedly yelled at him. What did they yell at him? They called him a rat. They also added some profanity. What happened after that? After the beating stopped, the victim was dazed. He stood up and walked away. He believed it was completely over. When you say he stood up, you are referring to Mr. Mitchell? Yes, ma'am. Mitchell stood up and thought it's over. What happened after that? Mitchell went to the sink within his cell and began to just rinse off his face. What, if anything, happened after that? He saw the defendant signing to a different person within the unit. I am sorry, he saw the defendant doing what? Like sign language. He was using his hands to talk with another person in another cell within the unit. All right, what did the victim describe to you after that? Well, he saw the defendant then come up to him and he forced his head against the mirror that's mounted on the wall. The defendant forced Mitchell's head into the mirror? Yes, ma'am. Are you familiar with an inmate with the last name of Randall? Yes. Do you see that individual in the courtroom today? I do. Can you describe what he or she is wearing and where he or she is sitting? He is sitting to my right and wearing an orange jumpsuit. May the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant. The record will so reflect. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. After Mr. Mitchell described that the defendant pushed his head into the wall, what did he tell you happened next? Mitchell fell to the ground and again covered his body from attack. Randall struck him with 2 blows to his head using his knees. How many times did he say the defendant hit him in the head with his knees? Twice. What, if anything, did Mr. Mitchell describe? The defendant continued to hit him along with Jackson and Baker. Did he indicate to you how many times he was hit or where he was hit? I cannot recall. Did Mr. Mitchell describe to you that he was beaten all over his body? Yes, he did. Did he describe how long that lasted? It lasted until the cell doors were opened because dinner service was starting. Did you have an opportunity to examine the victim for injuries? I did. What, if anything, did you observe? He had scratches and bruising to both shoulders and his ribs, scratches and redness to the right side of his face, and swelling to both forearms. Did he also have bruising that you saw on his neck? Yes, ma'am. After speaking with the victim, was he treated by somebody within the jail? He was escorted to the second floor in the jail and seen by medical staff there. At some point, did you put together a 6-pack photographic lineup to show to Mr. Mitchell? Yes, ma'am. Did you put the 6 photos together for that photo lineup? Yes, I did. Did you place the defendant's photo in the lineup that you prepared for the victim to view? Yes, ma'am, I did. What position did you put it in? I put him in the 3rd position. At some point, did you show this photographic lineup to Mr. Mitchell? Yes. Before doing so, did you read him the admonition about the lineup? Yes, ma'am. Did he understand those instructions? Yes, ma'am. After giving him those instructions, did he indicate which person he believed was the man who pushed his head into the wall and then continued beating him together with the other 2 inmates? Yes. Which person did he pick? He identified the defendant. I'm sorry, I meant to ask you which position in the lineup he chose. The person in the 3rd position. And that was the defendant? Yes, ma'am. Did you at some point have an opportunity to speak with the defendant? Yes, ma'am. Did you have a chance to observe his body to see if he had any injuries? Yes, ma'am. Approximately how long after speaking with the victim did you then speak with the defendant? I'm not certain. Now, what injuries did you observe on the defendant that night? The defendant had redness to both knees. Below his left knee, he had a cut about 1 inch long, also a scratch with a small amount of blood coming from it. Your Honor, one moment. That's fine. Did you speak with the victim to ask him if he was aware what the defendant was communicating with other inmates in the cell? Can you please repeat that again, ma'am? Sure. You earlier testified that after Baker and Jackson assaulted the victim, that he then went to the sink to clean himself up. you testified that the victim then saw the defendant, correct? Yes, ma'am. You testified the victim saw the defendant making hand signs to someone else? Yes, ma'am. Did you speak? Objection. That calls for conclusion of the witness. He can just describe the hand motions. Well, what's the offer of proof? I can lay foundation. All right. The objection is sustained for lack of foundation at this point. Thank you. All right, proceed. Deputy, you testified that Mr. Mitchell saw the defendant doing something with his hands. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Did Mr. Mitchell specifically describe to you what he saw the defendant doing with his hands? Yes, ma'am. What did he tell you he was doing? He said that he was signing to another inmate. Objection. It is still a conclusion. He was using his hand to speak. Just a minute. Is this an account of what happened coming from the alleged victim to the deputy? Yes. I will overrule the objection. Thank you, Your Honor. Next question. Did you ask Mr. Mitchell if he knew what the signs meant that he saw the defendant displaying with his hands? I can't recall. Well, would reviewing your report refresh your recollection as to whether Mr. Mitchell told you what he believed the hand signs that he saw the defendant display meant? Yes. With Your Honor's permission, please. All right, go ahead and just read that portion of your report to yourself silently. Let us know when you are done, please. All right, yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Deputy, did Mr. Mitchell tell you what he thought the sign that the defendant displayed with his hands meant before he assaulted the victim? Yes, he understood the defendant to be telling other inmates that he needed to be assaulted. I object. That calls for a conclusion. No foundation for the response. Well, what's the relevance here in terms of my finding probable cause in this case? Well, I think, how is this going to help me in deciding whether or not there is probable cause to believe, Your Honor, I'm sorry for interrupting. I am seeking to introduce it for the purpose of showing the joint efforts of the inmates in the assault. And what's the objection? Well, I think it just calls for the witness to give an opinion of what he believed the signs to mean. There is no foundation that he knew what any sign meant or if he had seen them previously. It's speculation as to what they meant. Okay, the objection is sustained as to the meaning. I will overrule the objection to the extent that there was signing between the inmates in this case. That is the theory of the prosecution. I will allow it to show there was some form of communication. Thank you, Your Honor. All right. Did the victim tell you who he believed the defendant was signing to? Yes, ma'am. Who did he identify? He gave the name of Scotty. Did he describe for you who this Scotty person was or what involvement he had? No, ma'am. He was unable to. Where did he say Scotty was when the defendant used the sign language? He was in a separate cell. One more question. When Mitchell described for you that all three inmates were assaulting him, you indicated that he told you he was being hit on all parts of his body, correct? Yes, ma'am. You testified that the defendant was kicking him, or, excuse me, was using his knees to hit him twice in the head. Yes, ma'am. Did Mr. Mitchell also tell you that the inmates were using closed fists to assault him? He reported that, yes. No further questions? Thank you. Okay, cross-examination. Thank you, Your Honor. Proceed. Did Mr. Mitchell tell you where the initial assault took place? This all happened in the module. Did he describe to you where exactly in the module? His housing location, sir, in his cell. He said it started in the cell? Yes, sir. At that time of the day, are the cell doors open so all the other inmates have access to that cell? Can you repeat that again? I couldn't hear your question. Deputy, were the cell doors completely open during the evening hours? In the evening hours, all the cell doors remain closed. Okay. Now, you didn't see the assault take place, correct? No, I didn't. Mr. Mitchell told you the assault took place in his cell. Yes, sir. Did he explain to you how the other two inmates were able to gain access to his cell? They were all housed in the same cell. To your knowledge, was there any type of video or surveillance equipment that was in use that would show the cell where Mr. Mitchell was located? Objection. Relevance. What's the relevance? To find out whether or not this witness viewed a video of this assault. Overruled. The only one we have shows the outside of the tank. It does not show the inside. Did you try to see if any of the assault was on tape to determine who was involved? No, I did not. There was no video available to you that you could watch to see who was in the housing location, correct? Not that I am aware of. Did Mr. Mitchell tell you how long the original assault took? I don't remember. Did he see where the defendant was before the assault took place by the other two inmates? He did tell me, yes. Where was Mr. Randall when the victim was hit by the other two inmates? He was sitting on a bench. So he was not involved in the original assault. Is that correct? Objection. Vague as to being involved. He did not participate in the first assault, correct? Yes, sir. When that one stopped, then you are saying that my client beat Mr. Mitchell, correct? Yes, sir. All by himself, correct? Yes, sir. Did Mr. Mitchell explain to you he was on the floor when my client allegedly hit him that evening? Yes, sir. He used his knees. What time was it that Mr. Mitchell approached you to report to you this attack occurred and that he wanted to roll up? I would have to review my written report. Deputy, would it refresh your recollection to review your report? Yes, sir. With your Honor's permission, please. Deputy, look at that portion of your report silently and let us know. Okay. What time was that? He told me at 4:30 that he needed to roll up. He gave me details about 5 minutes later. You finally separated the three inmates at what time? I would have to look at the report again. Would that refresh your recollection? Yes, it would. With your Honor's permission, please. Yes, go ahead. I think it's noted on the third page. What time was that? 6:30 is when we separated them. Then what time did you inspect Mr. Randall's body? I don't remember. It was about 9:50 before the three inmates were taken out of the module. Is that correct? Yes. Do you know if those three inmates were under surveillance or if they were detained by any other jail staff? Objection. Relevance. Overruled. Sir, can you rephrase the question? Between the time Mr. Mitchell told you he wanted to roll up and when the three inmates were taken out, were they being watched by any other member of the jail staff? They were not being directly watched, no. Then they weren't taken out of their cells and interviewed until after 11. Is that right? I cannot remember. Is it noted in your report? Yes, sir. Can you tell us if that will refresh your recollection? Yes, sir. All right, go ahead. Did that refresh your recollection? Yes, sir. What time did you interview Mr. Randall? At 11:45. So that's about 8 hours after the alleged assault. Yes, sir. Is that the first time that Mr. Randall's body is examined to see if he is injured in any way? Yes, sir. Is that when you first noticed anything on his body that made you believe he had been involved in some type of scuffle? Yes, he had redness to both knees. Could you describe that better? Were the knees scraped? I cannot remember. Were they cut in any way? On his left knee, he had a small scratch. When you say small, could you describe what size it was? I believe it was about an inch. Did you take a picture of that? Somebody took pictures of his knees, yes. Did you request for those to be taken? I believe I did. How soon after the incident was reported? Photographs were taken during the complete investigation. Your Honor, I don't think I have anything further. Redirect. Nothing further, Your Honor. May this witness be excused. Yes, Your Honor. All right, Ms. Oliver, you may call your next witness whenever you are ready. People rest, Your Honor. All right, Mr. Carter, does the defense have any witnesses? Not at this time, Your Honor. Does the defense rest? Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we would move to hold the defendant to answer to all the charges in the complaint. Will there be any argument on behalf of the defendant? No. Submit. Excuse me, Your Honor. Am I allowed to go? Yes, you are excused. Thank you for coming in today. Thank you. If you would just wait outside, please. Thank you, sir.